Associate for Raritan Headwaters Association. This is the second of three presentations for the Highlands Watershed Restoration Protection Plan that is being developed. The partners on this project are Rutgers Watershed Resources Program, New Jersey Highlands Council, who is funding the project, and the New Jersey Water Supply Authority, and yours truly, Raritan Headwaters Association. This entire Highlands region spans from Connecticut, New York, through New Jersey, and into Pennsylvania. The New Jersey Highlands Council oversees the New Jersey portion. In 2008, the council adopted a regional master plan that identifies goals, policies, and objectives. The Highland region is divided relatively evenly among the preservation area, where conformance to the regional master plan is mandatory, and a planning area where conformance is voluntary. The Highlands Council provides grants to municipalities, counties, nonprofits, universities, etc. In 2023, the Highlands Council issued a request for proposal for a watershed restoration and protection plan. The requirements of the proposal were to develop or update a watershed restoration and protection plan for one or more sub-watersheds. These must incorporate the EPA's 9 key elements essential for NJDEP water quality restoration grants. Watershed Restoration Protection Plan set the stage for implementation of funding through NJDEP water quality restoration grants under the federal 319H pass-through grants and other available grants. Once the plan is completed, it will provide recommendations to address point and non-point source pollution, harmful algal blooms, TMDLs, stormwater, etc. And they can be used in the development of the watershed improvement plans required by the MS4 municipal stormwater permit regulations. Rutgers Cooperative Extension Program, Raritan Headwaters, and New Jersey Water Supply Authority was awarded $371,500 grant from the Highlands Council, focusing on 24 HUCs in 14 subwatersheds across 21 municipalities. In the Headwaters, Raritan Headwaters Region, there are 21 municipalities that are in the Highlands region. So these are the municipalities that are part of this plan, and it will include all 21 of those municipalities in their entirety, because some of your municipalities fall outside of this area. We work hard at Raritan Headwaters to secure clean, safe water for present and future generations. We need partnerships across the watershed, municipal leaders, citizens, scientists, policymakers, etc. By working together, we can improve and maintain the integrity of our waterways, not just for ourselves, but all of the creatures sharing the land with us. I will now introduce the Principal Watershed Protection Specialist, Kathy Hale. She will give a brief introduction as to the New Jersey Water Supply Authority. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Tracy, and good evening, everybody. I'm with the New Jersey Water Supply Authority. We manage Spruce Run and Round Valley reservoirs, and then the Delaware and Raritan Canal as drinking water supply in this area. Round Valley and Spruce Run are the first and third largest reservoirs in New Jersey, and we provide raw water to the water purveyors, both private and municipal, who then treat the water and distribute it to end user customers. Between the Raritan system and then also our Manasquan system, we serve more than 2 million service connections. Our watershed unit was formed in 1999, and we work with different stakeholders to develop source water protection projects and also to assist with various tasks related to water supply operations. So my focus is generally on source water, which is any water that's used for drinking water purposes. In general, source water protection looks an awful lot like watershed protection. And source water protection is about reducing threats to water quality and quantity. So we look at protecting high quality resources, preventing increased loads and flows, and fixing existing problems. So this project really looks at regional watershed planning. And anyone that's been around source water protection or just general watershed protection for a long time knows that our watersheds cross municipal, county, and sometimes state boundaries. If we work together on a regional basis, we can share information, data, funding, and other resources, and then utilize these resources more effectively. So we really see an economy of scale when we work on a regional basis. We can identify issues that cross our watershed boundaries and look at issues that we share in common with a common focus. It's definitely more efficient to work on a regional basis as we have an economy of scale. And if we have coordinated efforts, we're going to have less repeated work across our watersheds. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Chris Obropta, who is with the Rutgers University Water Resources Program. And Chris is going to talk to you about the Watershed Restoration and Protection Plan and where we are so far in its development.
Thank you, Kathy and Tracy. And thanks everybody for coming. Can you guys all hear me? Yes? No? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Cooperative Extension has been around for about 100 years. Rutgers is a land-grant college for the state of New Jersey. So part of our mission is extending the knowledge out to the people of the state to help them solve their water problems, and I do that help them solve all their problems, but I do that for water, and trying to focus a lot lately on stormwater management. A lot of what we try to do is empower communities, engage communities to use these cost-effective solutions to help reduce flooding and improve water quality and stop harmful algal blooms and really improve the quality of life of the residents in their communities. Project partners, Highlands Council is funding this, and I really appreciate that. I've been working with them for a while. A great group of people up there. If you don't know them, you should really get to know them. Get a lot of resources. You just met Kathy Hale from the New Jersey Water Supply Authority. I've been working with them for years too. Another great group. Very much on the forefront of thinking about how do we protect our waterways by protecting our watersheds, and I think that's just really great. And New York City started doing that a long time ago, and New Jersey Water Supply Authority kind of took that on in New Jersey for their drinking water supply. And of course, the Raritan Headwaters, great group of people. They do a lot of really cool research, a lot of engagement, a lot of youth education too, which I like participating in. And they did a great plan we helped them do a great plan for Bud Lake, which is at the really headwaters of this watershed. So you'll notice when I show you the map, Bud Lake's not included because we already have a plan for that. Anyway, so let's move forward. So reason for this work, New Jersey DEP prepared a TMDL. TMDL stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. It's really a pollutant budget for a stream. What they've determined is too much phosphorus, too much sediment going into the stream, and they're calling for a 60 to 84% reduction in these pollutants going to the waterway. Why do we care about phosphorus? Well, phosphorus causes the algae to grow, causes harmful algal blooms, destroys the aquatic habitat, and sediment tends to settle out over the bottom of the stream, smothering out the aquatic community, the macroinvertebrates that are at the bottom of the food chain. So another big problem. Sediment's also a big issue when they're trying to clean the water to use it for drinking water. It's expensive to remove sediment, so any sediment we can keep out of the river stays out of the water treatment plant and helps reduce your costs for water that you pay. So the Watershed Restoration Protection Plan has these 9 steps, and really going to talk about the first 3 today. These are the most comprehensive and take the longest to complete, so we're going to focus on that. Identifying the causes and sources of nutrient loading, estimating the load reductions, and that are expected from the management measures that are recommended, and then recommending those management measures to address the causes. So Kathy Hale and I often talk about how these 3 are a little bit out of order, depending on how you look at it, but this is the way EPA gave them to us, so we try to keep them in order. Makes it a lot easier for New Jersey DEP to review the plan. So this is the watershed we're talking about, the South Branch Raritan River. You'll notice it traverses all the way down from Roxbury Township down to Highbridge Borough. This portion of Clinton Township, Tewksbury, all of California's in it, Lebanon, Washington Township, Chester Township, Roxbury, of course, and Mount Olive. And there's a little piece of Mount Arlington in there, I think. So this is what we're looking at. It consists of these 7 Huck 14. So A HUC 14, HUC stands for Hydraulic Unit Code. It's the way the United States Geological Survey classifies watershed and breaks them down to sub-watersheds. So a 14-digit code is a HUC 14, and you'll see that each one of these sub-watersheds has 14 digits, and usually just the last 2 digits change. So at the top of the watershed, you have 010, then you have 020, 040. 030 is actually the Bud Lake watershed, so that's excluded from this. Then we have 050, 060, 070, and 080 going all the way down to Highbridge Borough, right? So we can see here, this is the land use map. We typically cover land uses at 6 different land use codes. These are the basic land use codes: agriculture, barren land, forest, urban, water, and wetlands. We try to color the urban red because typically when we talk about non-point source pollution, urban tends to be a big source. And we look at the bar graph on the right. Really, the only 2 sources that we can address are agriculture and urban. Although forest contributes a lot because there's a lot of forest in the watershed, it's very difficult to try to remove any pollution that's coming out of the forest because it's just very natural and it's a big place to control. So we mostly focus on urban and agriculture when we're working on that. So we can see, we think about loading, non-point source loading, which is loading that washes off the land. So it's often referred to as non-point source pollution. It's often referred to as people pollution. Pollution that we generate every day of our lives. It's the oil and grease from our cars. It's the fertilizer we put on our lawns. It's the sediment that washes off the construction site or the farmer's field. So we have on the left side land cover, and then what New Jersey DEP is, they gave us these loading coefficients for total phosphorus, total nitrogen, total suspended solids, which is your sediment. So for example, high, medium density residential, 1.4 pounds per acre per year washes off of that land for phosphorus. For nitrogen, it's 15 pounds per acre per year. And for total suspended solids, it's 140. So these numbers are standard numbers that New Jersey DEP has used to develop the total maximum daily loads, or the TMDLs. So we try to hold these numbers and be consistent with them in our analysis, so we're comparing apples to apples when we come up with our plan. Okay, then we take those loading analysis and we apply it to the land use categories that we see in the watershed. So there's a lot more land use categories. 1110 is residential high density. 1120 is single unit medium density. 1130 is low density. 1140 is rural residential. So break these down, and then we apply those coefficients from this table to each one of these categories, and you can see that going down the side. And there's a lot more of these. I think there's about 88 different categories here. I'm only showing some of them on the left side, but there's about 88 to 90 of these throughout the entire South Branch watershed that we're studying. So when we do this analysis, we do this by HUC 14. So we do this by drainage area, okay? So everything is done by drainage area. Then we have a total number for the entire area, for the entire study area, which is all 7 of the HUC 14s. But you can see it here. This is broken down for each HUC by number of acres of different land use and by percentage of land use in that HUC, okay? So that's what's shown here. And then we have the same thing with area loading coefficients. We apply that, and we actually come up with how many pounds of phos per year is washing off agricultural land use in HUC 010 and HUC 020 and 040 and 050, and that's all shown here in the table. Now, why is this important? This allows us to focus on areas where we actually can make a difference. So if you have a large phosphorus load in a certain HUC, maybe that's where we want to start putting projects in first, and then maybe ignore some of the ones that have a little bit lower phosphorus loading. We could do that towards the end. So trying to figure out where to get the biggest bang for our buck, right? And then you can see it a little bit more here. But this is the overall table, and this is what we're working with for the entire study area, the entire South Branch that we're looking at. It's not the whole South Branch, but the South Branch that we're looking at, which is these 7 HUC 14s from Highbridge Borough all the way up to the top of the watershed. We have the number of acres of the different land use in the first column, and then we have the load from each of those acres based on those loading coefficients, right? So phosphorus is what we're really concerned about, and sediment also, but we're going to focus a lot today on phosphorus. 22,000 pounds per year of phosphorus is washing off the land uses. And you see the largest amount of phosphorus is coming off agricultural land and urban land. Even though forested land is much bigger in size, the loading is much lower, okay? Because very little phosphorus washes off of forested land, so that's why you see that in the table. So when we look at this table, we want to focus on agriculture, we want to focus on urban, okay? So let's talk about impervious cover first. This is really important because as we pave over our landscape, pollutants settle out of the atmosphere, including phosphorus. Dust and debris settle on this, so that's your sediment. And then it sits on these hard surfaces, it rains, and it washes off. So these are things that we're trying to capture that rainwater that comes off these surfaces, clean it, and filter it before it gets into the precious South Branch Raritan River. Okay? So Tom Schuler, he was from the Center for Watershed Protection, gave us this impervious cover model. This was his first attempt at comparing what the condition of a stream is compared to the impervious cover level. He looked at a bunch of studies, he analyzed it, and he found that once you get beyond 10% impervious cover, your streams become impacted. Once you get beyond 25% impervious cover, your streams are what he said non-supportive, just very, very polluted, right? So these are numbers we see a lot today. In your town, you may have a 10% impervious cover limit on a certain land use, like a certain zoning. Maybe it's a residential R1 zoning. You build a house on a 1 acre property. The most impervious cover you could have is 10%. This is where that came from. Okay. This was really meant to be applied at the watershed scale, but a lot of towns took this and boiled it down to the individual lot. Now, Tom Schuler got criticized for this work. He said, these numbers, 10% is a little bit high. So he went back and looked at additional studies, and he came up with this cone to show it a little bit better. So now you can see here that at 10%, you may be between fair and poor, but you could also be between good and excellent. So percentage isn't always the right number, the right thing to use when you're thinking about this, but it's a good indicator of where you're going to be. And you can see as you get down further, higher percentages, you get much poorer water quality. Okay. So let's look at impervious cover in our watersheds. So remember the 01 watershed is at the very top of the watershed, and the 08 watershed is the one that's in Highbridge Borough. And we can see these are impervious cover layers broken down by building, roadways, and others. So others usually parking lots, sidewalks, things like that. This doesn't really mean a lot to me. It's a lot of big numbers. So I look at this and it makes a little bit more sense, right? So at the top of the watershed, 18.1% impervious cover, 17.2, 10.8. So these are all the watersheds adjacent to the Bud Lake watershed, very high impervious cover. Even 8.9 is pretty high. And you get down to the bottom of the watershed, which is mostly that 080, is really a lot of it is at Highbridge Borough. So very developed, a small borough, about 16.9% impervious cover. Overall, from the entire South Branch, we got 8.7% impervious cover, which would indicate the South Branch is teetering on being an impacted or impaired waterway. And we know it's impaired because we have a TMDL for phosphorus and sediment for it. So we know it's exceeding the state standards for those parameters, right? And you can look at this again. It kind of shows you where things are. The 010 at the top, 020, 040, those are the three top ones. And then the 080 is at the bottom ones. And you can see the towns that they're associated with. Okay. So one thing we looked at, because phosphorus is a big issue, we looked at septic system analysis, right? So we looked at all the area that's in the source service area, and this is a layer that we got from New Jersey DEP. So the pink represents where the sores are. So everything else is on septic. And we went ahead and we looked at all the parcel data. So the parcel data, we can look at lot and block. We looked at which lots are within 200 meters of the stream. Now, why do we choose 200 meters? Well, this is a standard that New Jersey DEP has been using in a lot of their studies, really since back in the 90s, that if you have a septic system within 200 meters of the stream, it could be causing much more impact than something that's further away on the stream. So we worry a little bit about that. So we looked at, okay, how many houses are within 200, how many lots are within 200 meters of stream? Not just lots, but lots that actually have homes on it, and this is really focusing just on residential. And then we look at how many of those homes were built prior to 2000. Now that parcel database actually has when the homes were built, right? So if your house was built before the year 2000 and you have a septic system and it's about 25 years old, there's a good chance it's approaching the end of its life, right? And there's a good chance that it could be failing. So we can calculate the load from those septic systems shown here, and it's a big load. It's almost 15,000 pounds per year just coming from the septic systems. Okay, so that's an important number to kind of remember. Now, what we assume later on is we assume that 30% of those septic systems that were built before 2000 need to be replaced. And that's one number we actually have in the plan later on. We'll talk about that. Okay, in 2011, there was a fertilizer ordinance that was passed, basically saying that we can no longer apply phosphorus fertilizer to our residential lawns unless we have a soil test showing that the lawn actually does need it. So all the bags of fertilizer by Scott's and other companies that are available in Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart all have a 0 as the middle number, which is their phosphorus number. So they don't have phosphorus in it. A lot of companies reduce the amount of, or eliminate the amount of phosphorus they put in the fertilizer, decrease the bag size, raise the price, and call it a green fertilizer. So, a lot of different ways they did this, but in the end, it's very difficult to go to the store and just buy a bag of fertilizer that has phosphorus in it. Okay. Now, we thought a lot about that, and we said, well, the studies show us that although people tend to over-apply fertilizer on their lawn, one thing we can be pretty certain about is most people overspread their fertilizer, gets on the driveway, gets on the sidewalk, gets in the road. So they estimate on average about 2.5% of the fertilizer that's applied to lawns winds up on those hard surfaces. And when it rains, it washes off, goes into the catch basin, goes into the stream. So we can use that as a number of how much phosphorus has been reduced because of this law. And we looked at the total amount of impervious cover on residential lands and the total amount of lawn. And then we figured out how much fertilizer was applied. We used a standard application rate. And then how many pounds would have been overspread, that 2.5% onto the sidewalk and things like that. And we come up with 726 pounds per year of phosphorus that we're saving. So go back and think about the septic systems are contributing about 15,000 pounds per year. And now we reduced the lawn fertilizer by about 730 pounds per year. So not a lot compared to the impact of septics, right? Okay, so there's a lot of research been done on street sweeping. A lot of this work has been done down in Chesapeake Bay. Because of Chesapeake Bay's proximity to Washington, D.C., they get a lot of funding to try to clean up the bay, and they do a lot of research down at the University of Maryland. University of North Carolina has done a lot of research, Penn State. And one thing they had found with leaves and street sweeping is that it really could have a significant impact on reducing the amount of nutrients going to a waterway. So we looked at 4 things, right? We looked at street sweeping twice a week throughout the entire watershed. Now, is this realistic? Absolutely not. Barely do we get the street sweepers out once a month to do street sweeping. The state requires under the MS4 permit that you sweep the streets at least 3 times a year. And if they don't have curbs, then you only have to do it once a year. Okay, so we went down and we said, well, what if you just did it once a month? And we came up with a number. You see, it's much lower than the first row. And then what if you did it in the fall with leaf collection? Now, what does this mean? Now, we know from research that 43% of the nutrients that wind up in our waterways are deposited there in the fall when the leaves come down. So leaves get crushed on the roads, fine powder. They wind up washing down into catch basin and going into the stream. These leaves are loaded with nutrients that get released over the time. So if you do aggressive leaf collection and then street sweeping associated with that, you can dramatically reduce the amount of phosphorus that's getting into your waterways if you do that in the fall. Okay, so we looked at in this analysis. So what if you did that aggressive leaf collection and street sweeping in the fall, and then rest of the year did once a month? You'd have about 775 pounds per year of phosphorus being reduced, which is very similar to the numbers I just showed you a little bit earlier. So the other thing we looked at was existing stormwater systems. Okay, so mostly you think of systems, you think of detention basins, right? So detention basins or these wet ponds, maybe it's a naturalized bioretention system. So these systems are designed to capture rainwater, hold it, and then let it out slowly over time. The detention basins do very little to remove phosphorus. They remove only about 20% of the phosphorus. The retention basins, which are the wet ponds, remove about 50% of the phosphorus, and these naturalized basins, or these bioretention basins, remove about 60% of the phosphorus. Okay, infiltration basins can remove also 60% of the phosphorus. So we've identified all the basins in the watershed. How did we do that? Well, the Soil Conservation District worked with Rutgers, developed a database to show where all those basins were. There's also a land use classification in the land use data set that is classified as stormwater basins. It's code 1499. So we mapped all them out. We mapped all the ones from the database that Rutgers and the Soil Conservation Districts did, and then we went out and saw them. So we went out and looked at all of these basins to make sure they were still there and see what condition they're in. And we identified, are they a dry detention basin that's mowed once a week? Are they a naturalized basin that has just natural vegetation growing into it, in which case we assumed that it was more like a bioretention basin and gets 60% phosphorus removal? Is it a wet pond? Then we assumed it's a retention basin. And then there's some that were actually identified as infiltration basins, and a lot of that came out of the Soil Conservation District database, identifying as such, right? So we looked at that, and we went ahead and we can calculate the load reduction associated with those systems currently, and then if we change the detention to naturalize it or bioretention, how we can improve that reduction. So this table does not have any detention basins in it. There are detention basins in the watershed, but the removal rate goes from 20% to 60% when you stop mowing it and you naturalize it and turn it into a bioretention system. Okay. So we added all it up. Oh, Lamington River. This should actually say here, South Branch River. Sorry, I thought I fixed all those. But the non-point source loading base is 21,199. The septic system loading is 14,928. And then we took out the reduction that we're getting because the detention basins are actually reducing it. So we have about 35,000 pounds per year of phosphorus going into the South Branch Raritan River. Okay. The next thing we did was we went ahead and we identified sites where we might be able to go in and retrofit with green infrastructure. So New Jersey has some great stormwater regulations so that if we have new development getting built, whether it's a warehouse or housing development, it has to manage its stormwater. That development will have some impact on the waterway, but the impact should be very minimum because they're adding all these features, right? So minimum from a water quality, flooding, it's still a little questionable how much to actually reduce those regulations. But for certainly water quality, it should have a very small increase in pollution going into waterways from this new development. So we went ahead and we identified, well, is there existing development, older development that we could retrofit with stormwater management to make sure that we're treating that water and capturing it before it gets to the stream. The only way to clean up our waterways is to actually go back into older development that doesn't have any stormwater management and add stormwater management to it. So we did a scan and we looked for sites. Let me see. We looked for sites that are in the parcel database. There's a property class code, and there's a property class code 15 is for tax exempt properties. So it's 15A, B, C, D, E, and F. So A and B are related to schools. C is related to municipally owned properties or state-owned properties. And then I think D is churches. E is cemeteries and graveyards, so we didn't do anything with that. And then F is other. tax-exempt properties. A lot of the other properties are interesting. Some of them are veterans, like disabled veterans don't pay taxes in some towns, so so they actually are listed in there as tax-exempt properties. So we went ahead and we mapped out all those properties, and we looked at aerial photographs, and we identified 74 sites throughout the entire watershed where we can actually go in and put in rain gardens or porous pavement or cisterns or planter boxes. We'd be managing about 40 acres of property with these systems. So we went ahead and did that, and this is kind of what the table looks like in a report. It tells you the name of the site, the lot, size, how much impervious cover is on the lot, the drainage area for the system that we're proposing. So, this first one may be a rain garden, and of the 60,000 square feet of impervious cover, we're going to try to manage 12,575 square feet, right? And the rain garden size is going to be 2,740 square feet, and we actually have a small piece of porous asphalt in here, about 900 square feet in size. So we've done this for all 74 of those properties, right? We went ahead and calculated how much phosphorus would be reduced by putting these systems in. We looked at phosphorus if there's an underdrain system, so in other words, the system just filters the water. And then we looked at phosphorus if it not just filters the water, but infiltrates it back into the ground. The difference between the two is that if we're looking at just filtering the water for phosphorus, we get a 60% reduction. If we're looking about infiltrating the ground, we get about 90% reduction because the water is never getting to the stream, it's going into the groundwater table. Okay, so we also looked at rain gardens for managing rooftop runoff. So we had an impervious cover layer, said the number of buildings. So we actually have acres of rooftop. So we said, well, what if we manage 25% of the buildings and 1/4 of the rooftop for each one of those buildings? How much reduction would we get? And these are the numbers shown here in the table. And we would do that with the rain gardens, very simple system to put in, very inexpensive. So you're getting almost 82 pounds per year of phosphorus that's getting reduced, right? Okay. Lastly, we analyze farm parcels. Okay, so it gets a little tricky here. The parcel database is a little bit incomplete, but there's a couple ways to look at farm parcels. So the property class code in the parcel database of 3A and 3B are farm parcels. 3A is often the farmhouse, and 3B is often the farm that's being where crops are being grown or where cows are being housed, The other thing that they have is something called Q farms. So these are properties that have achieved a farmland assessment from a tax standpoint. Okay, so most of the 3B property classifications are also Q farms, but there are a lot of Q farms that aren't classified as 3A or 3B. I'm not sure why that is. So we went ahead and we figured that out. Okay, so we looked at this and we said, well, about 590 pounds from urban land of phosphorus per year, and I don't think that's right, and about 5,078 pounds of phosphorus coming from ag land. There's about 524 farm parcels totaling this number of acres. The problem is it could be labeled as a farm parcel, but it might not be completely farmed. So the agriculture land use in these parcels, even though it's 11,194 acres of farm parcels, only 3,096 acres of those parcels are actually classified as agricultural land use as being farmed. Okay, so this is overlapping the parcel data with the land use data that we have from New Jersey DB to kind of work that out. Okay, and you can see an example of it here. So on the left side, we see the farm parcels are in purple, and the orange is agricultural land use as delineated by the land use data from New Jersey DEP. And you can see there's places where you have orange, but you don't have any of the purple color because there's no farm parcel associated with it. And then you look at the right, now we've taken the purple out and we just have the border on there. And you can see even within some of the purple, it's not all orange because the whole parcel isn't being farmed. So we had to take that into account in this analysis, okay? And here's another great example of it. Lot 1 and 2 are not farm parcels, but they're being farmed, right? And so the question becomes who owns those? is somebody renting that property. We often see a farmer will be farming, and a lot of times it's either state or township or county-owned property being farmed by the farmer. You know, they pay a fee to rent that property, and they do that. So there's some property here in the watershed that is being farmed that is not part of farmland classified parcels. Okay, so we went ahead and did some of these calculations here. Phosphorus load coming from farm parcels, phosphorus load coming from the entire area, and then kind of average it out. So we're missing about 904 acres of agricultural land use. So in other words, about 904 acres are outside of that Q farms or classified farm parcels, and that contributes about 1,175 pounds per year. So just kind of want to show the inconsistency with data here. A lot of times we will be talking to farmers and saying, hey, we want to help you put in agriculture management practices to reduce the runoff from your farm, and we have some funding to help you do that. And are there other lands that you farm? And they may say, well, I farm this parcel down the road that I don't own, but I rent it and I farm it. So there might be opportunities to get them to also do something on that farmland that they rent. Maybe not, maybe so. We're not sure. Okay. We went ahead and we looked at the farm parcels and we said, okay, let's kind of classify these in a way where we can easily identify management practices that can go on each parcel. So here's the classification we came up with. We said there's row crops, livestock, horses, cows, hay or grass, you know, straw, wooded. Some parcels are all wooded. They're harvesting wood and selling that, and that's how they got their farmland assessment. Or nursery, where they have greenhouses and things like that. So if it's row crops, it's pretty easy. We can recommend putting in cover crop. So when they're done growing their corn, they put down annual rye. That'll hold the soil in place, and that does a great job at reducing the amount of phosphorus that's running off the property. Livestock or horses, well, we can exclude them from being near the stream and fence out the stream so they don't go in the stream, and then maybe put a little buffer in. Hay and grass, not a lot you can do for management practices unless there's a stream running through there and there's no buffer on the stream. Then you can put a buffer in. Now, all these parcels, what we did was we looked at the 524 parcels and we found that there was 206 of them that actually had streams running through it based on the figure on the left-hand side. And then we went out and we visited 91 farm parcels. Now, we did not trespass. When I say visited, we drove by it on the road to kind of see what was going on there, what they were growing, really kind of come up with the classification for it. If we could see the stream and see there was a buffer, then we would do that, but never actually violating the farmer's property. So if it's wooded, there's not a lot we can do, but if it's nursery, there's a lot we can do. We can harvest rainwater. When you're growing plants, you need propagating plants, you need a lot of water, so that's a great thing to harvest stormwater for, to use that. And we can do impervious cover management because a lot of those greenhouses have a lot of runoff and there's roadways between the greenhouses, so there's a lot of opportunity to do impervious management on nurseries. Then we came up with a table like this. We have a lot and block, the farm code, the municipality, and then we have the recommendation here: cover crop, enhanced stream buffer, impervious cover management, rainwater harvesting, livestock exclusion, manure management. So we have some of that here shown. We did have property owner's name in here, but I was told I wasn't allowed to do that, so we took that out. Okay. We looked really quickly here at cover crop, what kind of benefit we can get from that, and existing load from phosphorus load, and we can reduce, goes from 873 down to 524, or 524 pounds gets reduced. So very significant reduction by using cover crops. So, and cover crops are really inexpensive. So just getting farmers to do that would be a huge thing. And we just looked at 16 farms that were recommended for cover crop in this analysis. Okay. So this is the final table. Okay. So we have, all different practices, the phosphorus reduction associated with it, and the last one is septic system replacement. And you can see it could be huge. If you replace 30% of those septic systems that are over 25 years old, that are within 200 meters of stream, and you assume there's very little phosphorus coming out of them after you replace them, you could have a really significant reduction in phosphorus as a result of that. So that is one place where real things can happen, okay? So we have existing load compared to proposed load, so load reduction. So here we have it, we're recommending, the practice is recommending, we'll get about a 25% reduction. Now, remember in the beginning, I said they wanted a 60 to 84% reduction in phosphorus and sediment, and we actually have to add the sediment column here. We're still working on those calculations, but a 24% reduction in phosphorus is pretty good. To get a 60% reduction in phosphorus, you'd actually have to capture every drop of water that runs off every piece of land and run it through a bioretention system. I don't think that's very feasible. So a 25% reduction is actually a very good place to start. And I guarantee if you did reduce the amount of phosphorus going out waterway by 25%, you can look at that stream again. You may find that that might actually be enough to achieve the TMDL that they're trying to achieve. Once you start reducing the phosphorus, what the TMDL doesn't account for, now you're infiltrating more water into the ground, and that water is making its way to the stream as clean base flow, and that's going to help the stream out a lot. So there's a little bit of a balancing act. This is why we call it watershed management. It's an iterative process. We make recommendations, we do some practices, we measure the quality of water again, go back and forth, and eventually we get to a point where this is fixed, you know. Okay. Now the good part. So if you're from a municipality here, you have a MS4 permit for your stormwater system. So the M stands for municipal, the 4S is a separate storm source system. You have a general permit for your system. All 564 municipalities have that. What we did as part of this plan, we have an appendix with this analysis done by municipality. Okay. Now, every municipality that has an MS4 permit has to do a watershed improvement plan. Okay. Now, that plan can be done on a regional basis, individual town basis. While it makes sense to do things on a regional basis, many towns just really want to focus on what's going on in their community. So we can look at this. We have Roxbury Township as an example. Outlined are the Huck 14s. So in red are the Huck 14s that are actually in the South Branch, and the yellow are the Huck 14s that are in Lamington. So when we do this analysis by municipality, we bring in the South Branch data, the Lamington River data or Black River data. At this point, it's still a Black River, and the North Branch data. So we bring that all together and we have this analysis by municipality so that people can take this and use this as a foundation for their watershed improvement plan. Okay, so we look at land use based on that, right? Now we do it for the whole town, even though some of the hucks are outside of our study area. So even the ones that aren't colored, we're doing the land use analysis for. Okay, and you can see the land use here on the side. We calculate it by huck. Okay, and we have all that information here. And just showing you two hucks here. We have all of them in the town available. We do the loading coefficients or loading calculations for those. Another great thing for your watershed improvement plan. We do the impervious cover analysis. Now, the impervious cover analysis actually is required to be in your watershed inventory report, which is due the end of this year. The watershed assessment report, which is due a year from December 2026. The rest of this stuff will go into, but this piece here can actually go right into your watershed inventory report that's due at the end of this year, and you can see the different impervious covers by the different hucks here. Okay. We have that for the watershed. Okay, and then we have this is detention basins or stormwater facilities identified. So in this case, we've only identified the facilities that are in the watersheds that we're studying. So we just looked at, the South Branch, the Black River, Lamington River, and the North Branch. So the few hucks that are outside of those watersheds, we have not looked at detention basins for them, so you can see that here. And we show in the table, the top part of the table is from the Lamington study, the bottom part of the table is from the South Branch study. And you could see, whether detention, naturalized, retention, what are they? And then we have also agriculture information in here. So we have the farms listed in here, Q farms, and really focusing on all the Q farms are shown here and all the hooks. But we really only did analysis on what can be done on the farms that are within the study areas. Okay. So, and we could show the land use based on that. Once again, if it's a Q farm, not 100% of the farm is being farmed. So we take that into account here. And then we have recommendations for what you can do on the farms, right? And the final piece here is these are the tax exempt properties. So you can see property class code 15A is being shown here and these are just the first ones on the list. You can see the pink are all the properties that are tax exempt. A lot of properties here, a lot of schools, parks, schools, and you can see the name of the school here, the address, and the ones with stars next to are the ones we've actually went out and saw. So we went out and we saw, this school on Pleasant Hill Road, the one on Bryant Drive. We went and saw these sites, identified opportunities on these sites. Each site, we have a map like this for the entire township, showing all the sites that we identified. And for each site, we have two figures. We have this figure talking about the projects that we're recommending, and this figure showing where they would go. So in this case, the green circles are where bioretention would go, and the orange is showing where there might be an opportunity to do pervious pavement in the parking lot. So these are what we would call watershed improvement projects that would go in the watershed improvement plan. So simply clipping these projects out, including it in your watershed improvement plan as part of your MS4 submittal, we've just saved you a ton of money. You're almost done. Okay. So, the last piece before we go on, I actually have 4 engineers that I've hired with DEP funding to help towns take this information and turn it into a watershed improvement plan. So we do have resources to do that. If your town already doesn't have a consultant lined up to do that work, or you're not doing it in-house and you need some assistance with that, you can certainly call us and we'd be glad to talk to you about what we can do for you. We're being paid for by the DEP, so whatever we do is at no cost to you. So it's a great opportunity to try to help you save some money on this piece of it so you can spend the money elsewhere in dealing with your stormwater issues. Okay. So last thing is the final step. So the last sections of the plan need to be done. The last component is probably one of the more important components, the monitoring component. Now, Raritan Headwaters is focusing a lot of their efforts on putting that together. They do a great job with doing monitoring and setting up those plans. So that's really important. And then we'll set some interim goals. Number 5 is also very important, educational and informational component. Every MS4 permit requires every town, every year, to do a certain amount of education outreach. A lot of that stuff could be done regionally. So we've identified a lot of different programs, or we'll identify a lot of different programs in a plan that can be done that will not only help satisfy the MS4 requirements, but also educate the public to help them change their behavior so they can reduce their impact on the South Branch River, and in this case, the Black River or the Lamington River. And that's crucially important. I mean, we're talking about people pollution. The only way to stop people pollution is to engage the people, educate the people, and get them to take action. So taking personal responsibility, people changing their behavior, thinking differently about how they fertilize their lawn or how they pave their driveway, thinking about putting in a rain garden, doing rainwater harvesting. So there's a lot of opportunities where individual homeowners can help, irregardless of who's down in Washington, D.C. in power. Doesn't matter. Everybody owns their own property. You can do what you want on it. And you as a town want to put a rain garden in the library, you can do that. There's nobody stopping you from doing that, right? So here's some more information. Municipalities use this data. So once again, the watershed improvement plan, the mapping and the watershed inventory report is due the end of this year. We're in the process of helping towns do that. and put those things together. We're not actually mapping out their stormwater infrastructure, but we're helping them assemble it in the form that DEP wants. We've already submitted one to DEP for a town, and they've accepted it. They like what we've done. There's a guidance manual, and on the 23rd of April, we'll be talking about how to do that. We're doing a webinar. The Highlands Council is hosting it. So it starts at noon. It's 1 hour, and we'll talk mostly about this mapping and this watershed inventory report, and then a little bit about the watershed assessment report, which is due the following year, and then the final report, which is due a year later. Okay, so this is the program I talked to you about, my 4 regional engineers. Benny Rowe is the guy up here in Morris County. He's at the Highlands Council 1 day a week. He's housed there. We also have an office for him in Morristown on Speedwell Lake, where he's there a few days a week. So he's in the area. He's available to come out and see sites. We're already working with about a half dozen towns in the area, and we're hoping we'll be able to work with a lot more. And that's it. I'm going to hit stop sharing. Is that how this works? Okay, good. Did anybody hear what I said, or was I on mute? I wasn't on mute, was I? Okay, good. I'm not very
Every
good.
word on the edge of my seat.
I'm not very good with Teams. Yeah, Teams isn't my thing. If Tracy didn't break Zoom today, we would be on Zoom. It's all her fault, though.
It's all my fault. I broke the Zoom. Do you have control over there to answer questions? So
I don't. Yeah, I mean, you could.
they can unmute themselves, right? So if anybody wants to unmute yourself and ask Dr. Obropta any and all questions that you may have.
Yeah, just jump in.
He's willing to answer.
I was going to suggest you raise your hand so we can select you so everyone isn't trying to talk at once.
Okay.
Thank you, Christine.
See the raise your hand at the top of the screen?
Oh, I see that at the top, next to where it says people.
Yes.
Thank you for taking control.
I love when there's no questions.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah. Robert, you're still muted. You got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Can't hear him.
Uh-oh, still can't hear you, Robert. What's going on?
Try Skip. Hi, Skip.
And you guys can also type your questions in the chat if you can't get your microphone to work. Be glad to look at that too, okay? Skip, you have a question?
Bob had a question
okay, go
in
ahead.
the chat earlier.
Okay.
I answered a couple of his questions just about that this was focused on the Highlands. He's in Raritan Township.
Right.
He asked where you're obtaining your data on impervious cover and land use land cover.
Okay, so New Jersey DEP has an impervious cover layer, what was done in 2015, based on 2015 aerial. It's old, but it's actually pretty good. It's not that bad. So we've been using that. It's very consistent with what the TMDL data is. So it's, we're still comparing apples to apples. I wish we had newer data, but it's fine. And typically, if we had newer data, it would be for newer development that would already have stormwater management. So maybe we don't really need newer data. So, but that 2015 layer is great. And then the land use data we're using, I think, is 2020 from New Jersey DEP. And that's a really good land use layer. I like that a lot. The parcel data we're using, they have new parcel data every year, but we were using the parcel data, I think, from 2021, because that's the last parcel layer that had homeowners' names in it. And we were trying to use that to track homeowners that we could reach out and contact them. And then we were recently told that we're not allowed to do that in the plan, have people's names listed. So we have to be very careful about that. But that was the parcel data we're using. So and that's pretty good data too. Now I know Reddington may not be part of these studies, but if Reddington needs help with their MS4 work, they could still contact us. This is not exclusive to the Highlands. Benny would still be able to remain contact for that. And if you guys want to reach out to us and even just have a conversation, find out what we can do for you, we'll be glad to have that discussion. Okay.
Let's see if we can get Skip Jonas on here. I'd love to hear what he has to say. Skip, are you able to unmute yourself?
Well, he's got a question in the chat about the level of mapping is required. Okay. So there's a lot that goes into what's required this year. So and the mapping has to be done in a certain way, all in ArcGIS, so the state can bring it into their database. They've had some crazy idea they're going to bring all this together in one big map, but I don't think they've got enough computer power in the country to be able to do that. So I'm not sure that's going to happen. But so you need to map out where all your catch basins are, all your inlets for the catch basin. The inlet's just a grate on top, and the catch basin's a box underneath. So you need to know where all the inlets are. You need to know where all the outfall pipes are. You need to know the piping connecting the inlets. So you need to know that there's a pipe going from inlet 1 to inlet 2 and what direction it flows. It'd be great if you knew the size of the pipe, but that's not necessary. For every single outfall that you have going to the river or lake or wherever it's going, you need to know the drainage area for that outfall. And that is very difficult. That's the hardest part of this whole mapping, is that you need to have mapped out all your impervious cover and done that analysis. Let's see, what else? You need to map out any interconnection that your stormwater system has with another town, whether your system's draining to another town and then into the stream, or their system is draining to your town to another stream. And then they also want to know the sanitary connections between towns too. Once again, sometimes very difficult data to find. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm not sure if I missed anything. And then
Kathy Hale has questions.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Actually, it's more a comment, but just so on May 29th, Raritan Township's going to be hosting a presentation for municipal folks that's going to go over exactly what's required of the municipalities for their MS4 permit. We're going to have Becca Mazzola from WSP and Brian Friedlich from Kleinfelder speaking. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure you get the information on that. And we'll also make sure that, you know, Tracy and Christy get it to distribute out to the folks in this project.
Yeah, on the 23rd, we're doing a webinar, but we're just really focusing on the inventory and the watershed assessment report that's required. So not the entire MS4 stuff. That's a huge nut to crack. So I'm glad they're doing that. It's good. And Rebecca and Brian are great. They're great people. Both of them are really, really good. So.
Yeah, so Chris and Kathy, just send me any info on any of these kind of things to me. I have a very extensive contact list throughout the entire Raritan Headwater region. I can send it around. Anybody else?
So the bottom line is septic systems are bad. So I'm not sure septic systems are bad, but the way they're being evaluated by the state makes us feel that they could be a significant source of pollution. Now I know I grew up in houses my entire life with septic systems, and we pumped it every couple of years. We had it inspected regularly, and those systems worked fine for about 30 years before they had to be replaced. So. So I don't think everyone is failing after 25 years, you know, 30% of them failing, that might be a good number, but that's just based on literature that was explored in the Northeast. So I'm not really sure about that, but that could be a tough nut to crack. So you replace a septic system in New Jersey, tens of thousands of dollars. You know, $30,000, $40,000 replace a septic system usually. So how are homeowners going to be able to pay for that without getting some sort of low interest loan or maybe even a grant from the state? It's going to be difficult. So that's something that has to be considered, I think. And I do not know of any municipality with replacement program. Now, you can. I was told by the state there is an environmental infrastructure trust in New Jersey. They call it the Water Bank, and towns can borrow money from that to do water projects, whether it's wastewater, stormwater, drinking water projects in their town. Now, I was told the town could borrow money from that and use that to fix septic systems in their community. And they have to just assure that the money's going to be paid back. So one way they could do that is they could borrow the money from the state. And why they would do that is the interest rate is very low. It's almost 0% if you borrow that money, and just pass that on to the homeowner in the form of a lien on the property. So in other words, if you took some money from the town to replace your septic system, maybe you're paying extra $100 a quarter in taxes to cover that cost over the life of the house, the life of the septic. So that might be a way to do it without having to go borrow money from the bank or take a home equity loan out where you get tons of interest. So that would be an interesting thing to try to explore if this was a huge problem. Okay. So, okay, with that, I'm going to go grab a burger. It's burger night at my favorite place. So I'm going to go grab a
Sounds
burger and a
great.
beer. So
Delicious. Thank you, everyone who managed
Thanks,
to.
Chris.
please
Get
don't
on
hesitate to reach
Thank
out
you,
to us if you need
Kathy. Thank
anything.
you, Tracy.
Thank you, everybody. Reach out if you need anything or have any further questions.
Thanks.
We're
Bye,
just an email
everyone.
away. Okay, bye.